Today I am making a sourdough discard apple cake, and I thought I would chat with you about a few other simple and quick sourdough discard breads that you can make using your discard. So if you found this video, then you probably already know the difference between sourdough discard and mature starter, but just in brief, discard is what you get rid of as you build up your starter. It doesn't have the same fermentation levels or rising power as mature sourdough starter. And what this means is that if you're trying out sourdough bread because maybe you have a slight gluten intolerance, you should probably avoid sourdough discard bread recipes and just wait to make bread until you have a mature starter. But if you're here because you don't want to waste the flour and water as you build up your mature starter, then there are tons of quick sourdough discard bread recipes that you can try out. Now, one other caveat is that if you're here on this video looking for a recipe to make a crusty artisan loaf using sourdough discard, I just don't have a recipe for that. You can look online for a recipe, but discard really isn't powerful enough to produce those kind of loaves. So I just want you to know that before you watch this video. Quick breads made from discard tend to be flat, so flatbreads, or they're great in baked goods as well. So I'll go over a few of my favorites in this video. Now, most sourdough discard bread recipes call for at least a half cup of discard, which is actually quite a bit. So what you can do is you can build up your discard by storing it in the fridge until you have enough, and then you can make whatever recipe you want. I'm not going to talk through the steps of making this apple cake, but the recipe is over on the blog at documentingsimpleliving.com, and there'll be a link in the description. There's a video as well on this channel of how to make the cake, but I've updated the recipe a bit since posting the video, so it's probably best to go to the blog. Now, my starter is mature, but I've had it in the fridge for about a week, and I just fed it a bunch of flour and water, so its rising power is pretty weak at the moment, so similar to discard, but it'll work great for this apple cake recipe. So the first sourdough discard quick bread recipe that I like is sourdough apple muffins. So these are naturally sweetened, so no processed sugar, and they're ready in half an hour. And they only call for a few simple ingredients, so ripe apples, maple syrup. They're perfect with a hot espresso or with tons of butter for breakfast. Delicious and simple recipe that you can use your discard for. The second discard recipe that I love is making crackers. So I have a recipe for sourdough crackers with olive oil and herbs, and it's a no-weight recipe. You can use your discard. You can use fresh or dried herbs, or you could add in cheese to the cracker dough, tomatoes, even jalapenos before you put it into the oven. Now, the key with crackers is that you want to make sure that you only use a thin layer of discard, because if you want them really crunchy and crispy, you don't want to use too much discard. So you just do a thin layer on a piece of parchment paper, on a baking tray, and then you can put whatever toppings you want into the crackers, lots of salt, and then into a hot oven for a bit, and then you can just break them apart with your hands, and they're really delicious. The next bread recipe that I love using discard for is making flatbreads or naan bread. The recipes for both, they're pretty similar. They both work great as side dishes, but they also work great as sandwich bread or pizza bases, and tons more. So it's a really versatile, quick sourdough discard bread recipe because while it might be more challenging to make a nice, crunchy artisan loaf, you can make flatbreads or naan breads and use them as sandwich bread. The next recipe that I wanted to mention is sourdough discard banana bread. This banana bread is super moist and it's ready in under an hour, which is great. You don't have to wait. You need to have overripe bananas and honey or maple syrup. Again, no processed sugar in the recipe, and a few other common ingredients that you probably already have, and you can whip this banana bread up really quickly. Simple recipe, and it's great for breakfast or a snack. I like to put a piece of this banana bread in the oven, get it a bit crispy on top, lots of butter and peanut butter, really delicious. The next recipe that I wanted to mention is this apple cake recipe. It's a perfect recipe for apple season, which is coming up. If you have maple syrup, cinnamon, a few other simple ingredients on hand, you can make this apple cake recipe. You can even top it with homemade whipped cream. I either have a recipe for that or I will have a recipe for that soon of how to make cinnamon whipped cream. So really delicious, perfect for fall, and great one to try out. The final quick bread recipe that I wanted to share with you today is making savory sourdough discard scallion pancakes. These pancakes are so delicious. They're super savory and they use like 3 ingredients. So what I do for these is you just pour your discard into a bowl and combine cheddar cheese, so shredded cheddar cheese, some chopped up scallions, a little bit of baking soda and some salt, and mix that all together and then put it into a skillet that's really hot with butter, and you fry it a few minutes on each side. They're just so good. You can have them as just a snack by themselves, or you could cut them into pieces and have them as part of like a charcuterie board in the evening or something, but they take like 10 minutes to make and they're super delicious. I'm pretty obsessed with simplifying all aspects of my and my family's lives. That's why I started this channel and blog, to sort of document what I learn as I try to simplify our lives. And one thing that I've learned is that when you make your own food, it takes more time than buying it from the store, but it's much simpler because you can control the ingredients and you can control the quality of the ingredients in the food. One way I've tried to simplify our food is to make sure that we just reduce as much waste as possible. It can feel quite wasteful when you're building up a mature sourdough starter to keep discarding half of your flour and water. So by trying out a few discard recipes like these, it helps make sure that what you've already spent money on, the flour, doesn't go to waste. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. This cake is looking good, and I think I'm going to have a piece. So all of the recipes I mentioned are over on documentingsimpleliving.com. I'll leave links to them all in the description. If you have a foolproof, quick sourdough discard bread recipe, please let me know in the comments. But for now, thank you so much for stopping by. I make 2 new videos every week sharing what I learned about simplifying food, self-care, and consumption in the modern world. Subscribe if that's of interest to you, and I'll speak to you in the next Documenting Simple Living video.